If you happen to have purchased a cigar in the past 4 decades or so, there's a really good chance that it came protected by a transparent plastic like sleeve. Commonly referred to as cellophane, this transparent, commonly utilized material is something that wraps up and protects a ton of different cigars. Just stroll around a walk-in humidor or look through your Mix 5 pack at Clara when it arrives in the mail, and you'll discover that, sure enough, the vast majority of the stogies out there are covered in cellophane. And there is a very good reason for this, of course. Actually, come to think of it, there's way more than one reason for this, and that's why we've started up this deep dive today. But for cigar packaging, cellophane does a lot more than just protect the wrapper on a cigar. It has a lot of other purposes as well. In fact, a lot of people don't even think about what cellophane is to begin with or how it's made. So let's put on our lab coats for a quick tick and hop back in time to the early 1900s, where we're going to discuss for a moment how cellophane formed, how it became popular, and why it is utilized in the cigars that we love to smoke. According to the good old Encyclopedia Britannica, cellophane got its start in the late 1800s when rayon was invented. Apparently, a couple of scientists figured out that if you take cellulose, which is basically plant fiber and tree fiber or even cotton linters, and expose it to caustic soda and a chemical compound known as carbon disulfide, you get rayon. But it wasn't until about 1908 that a Swiss chemist by the name of Jacques E. Brandenburger discovered that if you take rayon and you further expose it to chemicals, you are able to produce sheets of transparent material that can be used for packaging and protection. Naturally, it took old Brandenburger quite a few years to develop the machinery and the right recipe for producing sheets of cellophane. But when he got it right in around 1912, 1913 or so, the guy immediately said, I'm going to put a name on this incredible invention that is uniquely my own and very understandable. Naturally, he took the cellu from cellulose and applied it to the French word for translucent. This French word is diaphin, and he just basically cut off the DIA and took the cellulose and put it together, and there you go. Cellophane. For the next few decades, cellophane continued to increase in popularity until it hit the US market, and that was about the 1950s, early 1960s or so, was when the plastics revolution was taking place, and everybody in the supermarket wanted to have all of their products neatly packaged and protected. This is where cellophane really got its foothold, especially in the American market, because then every little Nabisco cookie box got wrapped in this stuff. Packs of cigarettes got protected with it. You had cans of tuna, multi-packs, stacked on top of one another, wrapped up in cellophane and easily packaged together without the need for paper or anything else. However, it took the cigar industry quite a bit longer to get its paws on cellophane and start utilizing it for individually packaged cigars. Prior to the whole cellophane revolution, everybody was just slapping stogies in a box and packaging them up with a little bit of tissue paper and send them on the way. It really was not until the whole cigar boom started to get underway in the late 1980s and 1990s that cellophane started to show up on the vast majority of the cigars that you would encounter in a walk-in humidor. And unlike the great American cigar boom of the 1990s, cellophane has continued to grow in popularity over the past 2 decades or so, and there are several reasons why. First off is the most obvious of all of them, and that is the fact that it protects the outside of the cigar. Not only does it keep the wrapper from getting scuffed up when being handled at the factory or after it comes out of the box while it sits on a shelf in a walk-in humidor, but it also makes it possible for the cigar to be protected from elements like dust, bugs, droplets of water if you're outside at a barbecue and it suddenly starts to rain and you forgot your cigars are sitting over on the table. So cellophane does tend to protect your cigar fairly well in not every circumstance, but in a lot of basic instances. So essentially, cigar cellophane does its job from the moment that the stogie gets slapped into that sleeve and popped in that box, all the way up until it's time to slide said stogie out of its cellophane and fire it up. But there are other reasons why cigars get covered up in cellophane, with one of them being its transparent nature. Being that cigar wrappers and the color and style and sheen and looking for seams and veins and all the critiquing that we do matters so much to us as cigar snobs, having a transparent sleeve on the outside of the cigar allows consumers and critics alike to eyeball a stogie without manhandling it and getting their sticky, grubby paws all over that precious wrapper. The next interesting point about cigar cellophane that makes it ideal for stogies is the fact that it is selectively permeable. While things like dust and dandruff and pollen and all that crap tend to just flake up and blow off of cellophane, moisture and moisture that is still airborne in particular, like humidity, tends to pass through cellophane in a slow yet stable state. So while droplets of water will bead up and run off of the cellophane on your cigar, the humidity within your humidor will pass through it and soak into the cigar over time. This is why you see so many brick and mortar humidors brimming with cigars that are still coated up in cellophane because, well, it breathes. Something else that not a lot of people take into consideration is the fact that cellophane allows cigar manufacturers as well as suppliers to put a barcode on the back of the cigar. Not only does this make inventory and everything a hell of a lot easier and easier to track, but it also allows you to put on other interesting little additions to said barcode. Oftentimes, you will find that the cigar manufacturer lists the name of the stogie or the blend itself. They'll throw their logo on it or a QR code. You might even find out what kind of wrapper you've got at times, as well as if it's a limited release at times. Additionally, having that cellophane with that sticker on the back allows you to keep it closed because it sticks shut on the back, so you don't have to worry about stogies flying out on you. Now, speaking of stogies flying out of their cellophane, we might as well discuss at this moment in our little diatribe the highly debated topic of whether or not you should remove your cigar from said cellophane when you age it in your humidor. While certain stogie collectors and cigar aficionado even do recommend that you remove the cellophane from your cigar when placing it in your humidor for extended periods of time, we here at Claro find that it does a lot of good to keep it on, actually. Since cellophane does form up a very nice tight seal, especially if there's a sticker on the very bottom end of it, it slows down the dehydration process of the cigar itself. It also helps serve as a buffer to overhumidification within your humidor. So that means that essentially the humidity within the cellophane typically raises and lowers itself at a much slower rate than a cigar that's just sitting naked in the humidor right next to your hydro tray. Speaking of the Claro Hydro tray, have you ever noticed that sometimes you'll get a little bit of condensation, not on the inside of the cellophane, but on the outside of the cellophane when you place a cigar on top of that hydro tray? Yeah, that's the cellophane doing its job and keeping that moisture at bay. So imagine what happens to a naked stogie when you place it directly upon a freshly filled hydro tray. Over humidification. Additionally, adding further argument for keeping the cellophane on your cigars is the reasoning behind protecting that wrapper. Cigar rotation should be a weekly affair, sometimes even a bi-weekly affair, 2 or 3 times a week, whatever you feel is necessary, but do it regularly. Some of these rotational risks include cracking the wrapper because you scuffed the cigar up against the side of the humidor, dropping the cigar because whoopsie, butterfingers happen sometimes, or merely placing the cigar in the humidor and placing more cigars on top of it and the wrapper getting cracked just because of weight distribution issues. And then there are those individuals out there who say ridiculous things like, that cellophane on your cigar is going to affect the flavor of it. Smoke 'em naked, buy 'em naked, don't touch the stuff. This is complete and total bullshit. Cellophane is a completely flavorless and odorless product. The only thing that it might be affecting is the level of humidity within said cellophane, as well as its ability to age at a certain level over time. Being able to retain moisture for prolonged periods of time is really the name of the game when it comes to aging cigars. Naturally, you don't want to over humidify them and have issues with mold and whatnot, but also you don't want them to be too dry either because they will eventually crack and just turn to dust. And speaking of age, yes, a yellowish looking bit of cellophane on the outside of a cigar does typically constitute a cigar that has seen extensive amounts of aging. But before you head out to your local brick and mortar and start hunting through every box imaginable in search of that amberish colored cellophane wrapper, bear this in mind. Cigar manufacturers go to great lengths to make sure that the tobacco that is inside and outside of a premium long filler cigar arrives at its peak and ready to smoke right when you get it out of the box. Sure, additional aging will definitely help flavors meld and on stronger cigars help them mellow out a bit. But there's always a point of diminishing return, and it's kind of a crapshoot whether or not that yellowish looking cellophane wrapper you found in the back of the humidor is really going to produce a superior smoke compared to what's fresh sitting right in front of it. And finally, there is the topic of cellophane and its impact on the environment. While it is cellulose based, and that's great, it's plant derived, cellophane still does require the use of extremely dangerous caustic chemicals and heat and machinery and time, and pretty much every step of the production process really isn't that great for the environment. And because the majority of cellophane is not stamped with a BPI label, which does mean that it can be composted, there's a good chance it will stick around in a landfill for a little bit, but I guess will eventually break down. Just how long is the question. So while throwing your cigar butt on the ground and stomping it out really isn't going to do anything other than leave some charred leaves sitting around, safely, mind you, and fully extinguished, cellophane might stick around a little bit longer if you decide to snip it up in your compost bin and then spread it out in the garden. Our advice is put it in the trash bin or plastic recycling or whatever you feel is necessary and go about your day. Speaking of going about my day, I think I'm going to slide this stogie out of its cellophane and give it a little pufferoo. I'll catch y'all in the next 3-minute deep dive. Thanks for joining us. Oh, I almost forgot. Did you know that cellophane makes really great ASMR videos? But only if you're into that sort of thing. Weirdos.